Marcus Chen adjusted his diplomatic uniform for the third time as the transport shuttle descended through the crimson atmosphere of Vorthak. The planet looked like something out of a nightmare, with jagged black mountains piercing through blood red, clouds and cities that resembled massive obsidian fangs jutting from the surface. He had been chosen for this mission precisely because of his reputation for staying calm under pressure. But right now his hands were trembling slightly as he reviewed the briefing materials one more time. The Sanguinari Empire had been a thorn in humanity's side for nearly 30 years. Their sleek black ships would appear without warning at the edge of human colonies, striking with surgical precision before vanishing back into the void. They never stayed to occupy territory, never demanded tribute, and never responded to any attempts at communication. They simply took what they wanted and left, usually carrying away dozens of colonists who were never seen again. Marcus had volunteered for this diplomatic mission when the Sanguinari had finally sent a message to Earth's government. It was brief and written in perfect English, which had surprised everyone. The message simply stated that their queen would meet with one human representative to discuss terms. No threats, no demands, just an invitation that felt more like a royal summons. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad carved from what looked like volcanic glass. As Marcus stepped out, he was immediately struck by how the air itself seemed to hum with energy. It made the hair on his arm stand up and sent tiny shivers down his spine. Two tall figures in elaborate armor were waiting for him, their faces hidden behind masks that resembled stylized skulls. Neither of them spoke as they escorted him through corridors lined with what appeared to be living metal. The walls pulsed, with a faint bioluminescent glow, and Marcus could swear he heard something like a heartbeat echoing through the structure. Everything about this place felt ancient and powerful in a way that made him acutely aware of how young humanity was in comparison. The throne room doors were easily 20 feet tall and covered in intricate carvings that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. They opened silently, revealing a vast chamber with a ceiling that stretched up into darkness. At the far end, illuminated by pillars of crimson light, sat a throne carved from a single piece of black crystal, and on that throne sat Queen Zixithera. Marcus had seen the intelligence reports, but nothing had prepared him for seeing her in person. She was tall even while seated, easily 7 feet if she stood, with elegant features that were almost but not quite human. Her skin had a pale luminescence to it, and her hair was a deep silver that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were a brilliant crimson that seemed to glow with their own inner fire, and when they fixed on him, he felt like she was looking directly into his soul. She was wearing elaborate battle armor that looked like it had been crafted by master artisans. Every piece was decorated with flowing designs that seemed to tell stories, and the whole ensemble managed to look both beautiful and terrifyingly functional. A cape of what looked like liquid shadow flowed behind her, moving as if it had a life of its own. Marcus walked forward on legs that felt less steady than he would have liked. The chamber was completely silent except for his footsteps echoing off the walls. When he reached what he judged to be an appropriate distance, he stopped and gave what he hoped was a respectful bow. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the vast space. "I am Marcus Chen, diplomatic representative of the United Earth Government. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." The Queen studied him for a long moment without speaking. Her gaze was so intense that Marcus found himself fighting the urge to fidget. When she finally spoke, her voice was rich and melodious, with an accent he couldn't place. "Marcus Chen," she said, pronouncing his name carefully. "You are smaller than I expected." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he simply nodded. "I hope we can find a way to resolve the conflicts between our peoples peacefully, Your Majesty." Something that might have been amusement flickered across her features. "Conflicts? Is that what you call them?" "The raids on our colonies have caused considerable hardship," Marcus said, trying to keep his tone diplomatic rather than accusatory. "Families have been separated, resources taken, people—" He paused, not wanting to say killed if there was any chance the missing colonists were still alive. "People taken," the Queen finished for him. "Yes, I am aware of your concerns." The way she said it made Marcus's blood run cold. There was something in her tone that suggested she knew exactly what had happened to those people, and that it was not something he would want to hear about. "Perhaps we could discuss terms for ending these activities," Marcus said carefully. The Queen leaned forward slightly, her crimson eyes never leaving his face. "What kind of terms did you have in mind, Marcus Chen?" The formal negotiations that followed were unlike anything Marcus had experienced in his diplomatic career. The Queen seemed more interested in studying him than in discussing actual policy. She asked strange questions about human culture, about their emotions and dreams, and fears. Every time Marcus tried to steer the conversation back to the raids or reparations or territorial agreements, she would deflect with another personal question. Hours passed, and Marcus found himself growing more nervous and frustrated. Nothing, he said, seemed to make any impact, and the Queen's intense stare was beginning to make him feel like a specimen under a microscope. His translator device had been acting up all day, occasionally producing garbled output that made him repeat himself. Finally, during a particularly tense moment when the Queen had asked him something about human mating rituals, and Marcus was struggling to find a diplomatic way to change the subject, his nerves got the better of him. "Look, Your Majesty," he said, running a hand through his hair in exasperation. "I don't know what kind of game this is, but I came here in good faith to try to work out a peace agreement. If you're not interested in serious negotiations, then just tell me now. I want you—" He paused, intending to continue with something about wanting her to be honest with him, or wanting her to take this seriously. But at that exact moment, his malfunctioning translator chose to cut out completely. The effect on the Queen was immediate and dramatic. Her eyes went wide, and she sat up straight on her throne as if she had been struck by lightning. For several seconds, she simply stared at him with an expression of what looked like shock, mixed with something else that Marcus couldn't identify. Then, to his absolute horror, she began to remove her armor. She started with the ornate shoulder pieces, setting them aside with careful, deliberate movements. Then came the chest plate, revealing elegant clothing underneath that looked like it was made from starlight and shadow. Her movements were graceful and purposeful, and with each piece of armor that came off, Marcus felt his panic rising. "Your Majesty," he said quickly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My translator malfunctioned and I didn't finish what I was saying. I didn't mean—" He trailed off, not even sure what he was trying to deny. But the Queen wasn't listening. She continued removing her armor with the same ceremonial precision, her eyes never leaving his face. Around them, Marcus became aware that the few courtiers present in the chamber were beginning to make excited chittering sounds, like insects communicating in their own language. As the last piece of her battle gear was set aside, leaving the Queen in flowing garments that somehow made her look both more elegant and more dangerous, Marcus realized that he had somehow managed to step into a situation that was far more complicated than a simple diplomatic misunderstanding. The Queen rose from her throne, standing to her full imposing height, and smiled at him with what looked like genuine warmth mixed with predatory satisfaction. "Well," she said softly, "this is unexpected." Marcus stood frozen in the center of the throne room, watching in growing horror as Queen Zixathera descended the steps from her throne. Without her armor, she moved with a fluid grace that reminded him of a predator stalking its prey. The flowing garments she wore seemed to shift and shimmer with their own light, and Marcus found himself torn between being terrified and oddly mesmerized. The chittering sounds from the courtiers were growing louder and more excited. Marcus turned his head slightly and saw that more sanguinari had appeared in the chamber, emerging from alcoves and doorways he hadn't even noticed before. They were all staring at him with expressions that ranged from shock to what looked like anticipation. "Your Majesty," Marcus said again, his voice cracking slightly. "Please, I need to explain. There was a translation error. I wasn't trying to say what you think I was saying." The Queen paused in her approach, tilting her head to one side like a curious bird. "Translation error?" she repeated, and now there was definitely amusement in her voice. "Marcus Chen, do you know what you just did?" "I have no idea," Marcus admitted. deciding that honesty was probably his best option at this point. But judging by everyone's reaction, it was something significant. A tall sanguinari wearing robes instead of armor stepped forward from the crowd of courtiers. Unlike the others, he looked more concerned than excited. "My queen," he said in accented but clear English, "perhaps we should clarify the situation before proceeding." The queen waved a hand dismissively. "Speak, Vorthak." The robed figure, apparently named Vorthak, turned to Marcus with what might have been sympathy in his dark eyes. "Human diplomat in our culture, when one removes their battle armor in the presence of another after such words are spoken, it signifies acceptance of a claiming bond." "A claiming bond?" Marcus repeated weakly. "A mating arrangement," Vorthak explained. "By declaring that you wanted our queen, and by her removing her armor in response, you have essentially proposed marriage according to our ancient customs." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Marriage?" The queen's smile widened, revealing teeth that were definitely sharper than human normal. "The bond ceremony is quite beautiful," she said conversationally, "though it has been several centuries since I last participated in one." "But I didn't mean to propose," Marcus protested. "It was a mistake, a translation error." The chittering from the courtiers took on a different tone, and Marcus noticed that several of them were backing away, slightly. Vorthak's expression became even more concerned. "My queen," he said carefully. "If the human wishes to withdraw the claiming, we must consider the implications." "What implications?" Marcus asked, though he was already dreading the answer. The queen's smile faded, and for the first time since removing her armor, she looked truly dangerous. To refuse a claiming bond after it has been offered and acknowledged is considered the gravest possible insult in sanguinari culture, she said softly. "It is equivalent to declaring that the other party is unworthy of existence, which is traditionally answered with immediate warfare," Vorthak added helpfully. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, the queen was standing directly in front of him, close enough that he could see flecks of gold in her crimson irises. "However," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "I find myself curious about this translation error you mentioned. What were you actually trying to say?" Marcus swallowed hard. "I was frustrated with the negotiations. I wanted to say that I wanted you to be honest with me, or to take the discussion seriously. Something like that." My translator cut out before I could finish. The queen studied his face for a long moment. "Interesting. And you truly had no intention of claiming me as a mate?" "None whatsoever," Marcus said quickly, then realized how that might sound. "Not that you're not. I mean, you're obviously. What I'm trying to say is, he finds you attractive but had no romantic intentions," Vorthak translated dryly. "A common diplomatic predicament." The queen laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with distant thunder. How refreshingly honest. She turned and walked back toward her throne, but didn't sit down. Instead, she leaned against the armrest in a pose that somehow managed to be both casual and regal. "Tell me, Marcus Chen," she said. "What do you know about my people? About what you call the sanguinari?" Marcus was grateful for the change of subject, even though he suspected it was only temporary. "Not much, I'm afraid. Our intelligence suggests you're an ancient spacefaring civilization. We know you have advanced technology and powerful ships. The raids on our colonies suggest you need something from us, though we've never been able to determine what." "Raids," the queen mused. "Such an ugly word for what we consider shopping expeditions." The casual way she said it made Marcus's stomach clench. "Shopping for what?" "For you, of course. For humans." She gestured toward him. "Your species possesses something that mine has not encountered in millennia of existence." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "What's that?" The queen's eyes began to glow more brightly. "You call us vampires in your folklore, do you not? The resemblance is superficial but understandable. We do feed on life energy but not blood. We consume bioelectrical patterns, the energy signatures produced by living minds." "You're telepathic parasites," Marcus said. taking an unconscious step backward. Parasites? The Queen's voice carried a note of offense. We prefer the term connoisseurs. For thousands of years, we have sampled the neural patterns of countless species across the galaxy. Most are simple, predictable, offering little more than basic sustenance. But humans, she paused, her expression becoming almost dreamy. Human minds are extraordinarily complex. Your thoughts create patterns of such beauty and intensity that they are practically intoxicating. Marcus was beginning to understand, and he didn't like the direction his thoughts were heading. So the people you've taken from our colonies are living quite comfortably in specially designed habitats, the Queen finished. We do not harm our food sources, Marcus Chen. We are not barbarians. The humans in our care are treated with the utmost consideration. They live in luxury, wanting for nothing, while we occasionally sample the unique flavors of their consciousness. Sample? Marcus's voice was getting higher. You're keeping humans as livestock. The Queen's expression darkened. Livestock do not receive the reverence and care that we provide. Your people are treasured guests, sharing the gift of their remarkable minds with beings who can truly appreciate such artistry. Have you asked them if they want to be treasured guests? The Queen paused, looking genuinely puzzled by the question. Why would we ask? We provide everything they could need or want. Marcus stared at her, realizing that this conversation had revealed something far more disturbing than simple military aggression. The Sanguinari weren't raiders or conquerors. They were collectors, and they saw humans as the ultimate collectible item. Your Majesty, he said carefully, in human culture, freedom of choice is considered more valuable than material comfort. Taking people against their will, even to provide for them, is something we find deeply wrong. The Queen tilted her head again. Even if the alternative is a shorter, more difficult life? Even then. She was quiet for several moments, seeming to consider this. Fascinating. Your species continues to surprise me. Vorthak cleared his throat. My Queen, we still have the matter of the claiming bond to resolve. The Queen's attention snapped back to Marcus. Indeed we do. She walked toward him again, but this time her approach seemed more thoughtful than predatory. Marcus Chen, you have presented me with an interesting dilemma. According to our law, you have claimed me, and I have accepted. To reverse this now would require either your death or a state of war between our peoples. Those seem like rather extreme options, Marcus said weakly. They are the only options our culture recognizes, the Queen replied. However, you have also given me much to think about regarding your people's values and perspectives. Perhaps there is a third alternative that our laws have never needed to consider. She stopped directly in front of him again, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and distant starlight. I propose that we proceed with the bonding ceremony, but treat it as what your people might call a diplomatic marriage, a formal alliance between our species, sealed by the union of their representatives. Marcus felt his knees go weak. You want to marry me to prevent a war? The Queen's smile returned, sharper than before. I want to marry you because I find you far more interesting than I expected, and because your people possess qualities that mine desperately needs to survive what is coming. What's coming? But before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber, and the walls themselves seemed to pulse with urgent red light. The alarms continued their piercing wail as Sanguinari soldiers rushed into the throne room. Marcus watched in fascination and growing dread as they moved with inhuman speed and coordination, their armor seeming to flow and adapt as they took defensive positions throughout the chamber. Queen Zixithara's entire demeanor changed in an instant, transforming from a curious potential bride back into what was clearly a seasoned military commander. Report, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. A soldier approached and spoke rapidly in the Sanguinari language, a series of clicks and musical tones that Marcus's broken translator couldn't even attempt to process. Whatever the message was, it made the Queen's expression turn grim. How long? She asked in English. 6 hours, my Queen. Perhaps less. The Queen nodded curtly and turned to Marcus. It seems our courtship will be accelerated by circumstances beyond our control. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. "The Devourers have found us," the Queen said simply. "A fleet of their harvester ships is approaching this system. They will be here within hours." Marcus had heard whispers about the Devourers in intelligence briefings, but they had always seemed more like a myth than a real threat. "The machine intelligence that destroys planets?" "They are far more than that," Queen Zixthera said, her voice carrying a weight of ancient fear. "They are entropy given form, the end of all organic life. For 3,000 years they have been moving through this spiral arm of the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Worlds, civilizations, entire species simply vanish when they pass." Vorthak stepped forward, his robes now somehow transformed into practical armor. "My queen, the bonding ceremony could provide the alliance we need, but only if it is completed before the attack begins." Marcus felt like events were spiraling completely beyond his control. "Wait, what bonding ceremony? I thought we were discussing a diplomatic marriage." The Queen's expression softened slightly as she looked at him. "Marcus Chen, I have not been entirely honest with you about our customs. The bonding ceremony is not merely symbolic. It creates an actual psychic link between participants, allowing them to share thoughts, emotions, and even certain abilities. You want to form a mental connection with me? I want to save both our species," she replied. "The Sanguinari have fought the Devourers before. We have lost every encounter. Our technology is ancient and powerful, but it follows predictable patterns. The Devourers adapt to everything we throw at them. But humans—" She paused, studying his face. "Humans think in ways that defy logic. Your minds create chaos where we create order." Marcus was beginning to understand. "You think human unpredictability might be the key to defeating them. I think human unpredictability, combined with sanguinary power and knowledge, might be our only hope." The Queen extended her hand toward him. "But the bonding ceremony requires mutual consent. I cannot force this connection upon you." Marcus stared at her outstretched hand. Around them, the activity in the throne room was becoming more frantic, as reports continued to pour in about the approaching fleet. He thought about Earth, about the colonies, about all the humans currently living as treasured guests in sanguinary facilities. "If I agree to this," he said slowly, "what happens to the humans you've already taken?" The Queen's expression became unreadable. "That would be part of our bonded negotiations. And if the Devourers win, then it becomes irrelevant. Because all life in this sector of the galaxy will cease to exist." Marcus took a deep breath and reached for her hand. The moment their skin made contact, he felt a jolt of electricity run up his arm. The Queen's eyes widened slightly, and he realized she had felt something too. "The ceremony must begin immediately," Vorthak announced. "The bonding chambers are prepared." What followed was a blur of activity that Marcus's human mind struggled to process. He was escorted through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves as they walked, past chambers filled with technology that looked like it had grown rather than been built. The Sanguinari moved around them with purposeful urgency, and Marcus caught glimpses of massive screens showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The bonding chamber was a circular room with walls made of what looked like living crystal. Patterns of light moved through the walls like blood vessels, and the air hummed with energy that made Marcus's teeth ache. In the center of the room was a raised dais with two seats facing each other, connected by a bridge of the same crystalline material. "The first trial is combat prowess," Queen Zixthera explained as they took their seats. "You will face the combat records of my previous suitors in virtual simulation. Defeat them, and we proceed to the second trial." "Previous suitors?" Marcus asked weakly. 17 of the greatest warriors in sanguinary history," she said casually. "Do not worry. The simulation cannot actually kill you." Before Marcus could protest, the world dissolved around him and he found himself standing in what looked like a gladiatorial arena. Across from him stood a figure in elaborate armor wielding weapons that seemed to shift between energy and solid matter. The figure moved with inhuman speed and precision, attacking with combinations that would have been impossible for any human warrior to execute. Marcus barely managed to dodge the first strike. He had no weapon, no armor, and no idea what he was supposed to do against an opponent that could move faster than his eyes could track. The second attack came immediately, and this time he wasn't quick enough to avoid it completely. Pain flared across his shoulder as the energy blade connected. But as the third attack came, something in Marcus's mind shifted. Instead of trying to match his opponent's speed and skill, he did something that felt completely wrong by every military manual he had ever read. He stopped trying to fight properly and started fighting dirty. He threw sand in his opponent's face, used the arena's obstacles in ways they weren't designed for, and when the warrior's weapon got stuck in the wall, Marcus simply ran away until he could find a better position. Every move he made was unpredictable, chaotic, and tactically questionable, and somehow it worked. The simulation opponents were programmed to expect honor, skill, and traditional combat techniques. They had no protocols for dealing with someone who would pretend to surrender and then kick them in sensitive areas, or who would use their own cape as a weapon by throwing it over their head and attacking while they were blinded. One by one, Marcus defeated warriors who should have been far beyond his ability to challenge. Not through superior skill or strength, but through sheer, chaotic unpredictability that the simulations couldn't adapt to fast enough. When the combat trial ended, and Marcus found himself back in the bonding chamber, Queen Zixathera was staring at him with an expression of amazement. "Remarkable," she breathed. "You defeated opponents who have never been beaten in simulation." "How?" "I cheated," Marcus said honestly. "I fought like a desperate human instead of an honorable warrior." The Queen's smile was brilliant. "Perfect." The second trial is resistance to bioelectric drain. This trial was different. Instead of virtual combat, Marcus felt the Queen's consciousness pressing against his own. It should have been overwhelming, like standing in front of a star and trying not to be burned away. But instead of the painful drain he expected, Marcus felt something strange happening. The connection between them was creating feedback loops, his chaotic human thoughts bouncing off her ordered sanguinary patterns and creating something entirely new. "Impossible." Vorthak's voice came from somewhere outside the chamber. "The human is not being drained. He is amplifying her power." The third trial was tactical command. Marcus found himself in charge of a sanguinary battle fleet facing impossible odds against a simulated enemy force. The traditional sanguinary tactics were elegant and effective, but Marcus could see immediately that they would fail against an opponent that could adapt and counter every move. So instead of following the tactical doctrine that had been used successfully for millennia, Marcus started giving orders that made no tactical sense whatsoever. He had ships break formation at crucial moments, ordered retreats that looked like panicked flight but led enemies into traps, and coordinated attacks that seemed random but created perfect storms of destruction. The simulation enemies, designed to counter logical military strategies, had no response to tactics that defied logic entirely. The victory was complete and devastating. When the trials ended, Marcus found himself still connected to the Queen's mind. He could feel her thoughts, her amazement, and underneath it all, something that felt like hope for the first time in centuries. "The bonding is complete," she said, and her voice seemed to come from inside his own head as well as from her lips. "Now we must prepare for war." The psychic bond between Marcus and Queen Zixathera was unlike anything he could have imagined. Through the connection, he could feel her consciousness like a vast library of memories, stretching back thousands of years. Her thoughts moved in, precise, elegant patterns that reminded him of classical music, while his own chaotic human mind seemed to create jazz improvisations that somehow harmonized with her mental symphony. As they rushed from the bonding chamber toward the command center, Marcus experienced flashes of the Queen's memories. He saw the first time the Devourers had attacked sanguinary space 3 millennia ago. Entire star systems had simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but empty space where planets and suns had once existed. The mechanical entities didn't just destroy civilizations. They consumed them so completely that even the atoms were broken down and absorbed into their ever-growing fleet. They learn from everything they encounter. The Queen's voice echoed in his mind as they entered the command center. Every weapon we use against them, every tactic we employ becomes part of their knowledge base. Within hours of first contact, they developed perfect counters to our strategies. The command center was a marvel of organic technology, with walls that pulsed like living tissue and displays that seemed to float in midair without any visible support. Dozens of sanguinary officers worked at stations that responded to touch and thought, coordinating the defense of their homeworld. Through the main view screen, Marcus could see the approaching Devourer fleet, a collection of geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. "Status report," the Queen commanded, her voice carrying both vocally and telepathically to every person in the room. Admiral Kithara, a scarred veteran whose armor told the story of countless battles, stepped forward. "My Queen, long-range sensors show 47 Devourer vessels approaching. Their formation suggests this is a harvesting expedition, not a scouting mission. They intend to consume this entire system." Marcus studied the tactical display, his human mind automatically analyzing the enemy formation. Through his bond with the Queen, he could access sanguinary military databases, and what he found there was deeply troubling. Every previous engagement with the Devourers had followed the same pattern. Initial success with conventional tactics, followed by rapid adaptation from the enemy, leading to complete defeat within hours. "We have assembled every available ship," Admiral Kithara continued. 112 vessels, including the Royal Fleet. "Our total firepower exceeds anything we have ever deployed against the Devourers, and it will not be enough," the Queen said quietly. "Show him the historical records." The main display shifted to show previous battles against the Devourer forces. Marcus watched in horror as elegant sanguinary formations were systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to learn and adapt in real time. Weapons that worked perfectly in the first few minutes of battle became useless as the Devourers developed countermeasures. Tactical maneuvers that should have been unpredictable were anticipated and countered within their second use. "They are not truly artificial intelligence as you might understand it," the Queen explained through their mental link. "They are something far worse. Pure logic given physical form, with no emotion, no intuition, no capacity for the beautiful chaos that drives organic life." Marcus felt a spark of understanding. "That's why you need humans. We don't think logically. Your species excels at what we call productive irrationality," she confirmed. "You make decisions based on emotion, intuition, and patterns that exist only in your chaotic minds. The Devourers cannot predict you because you do not predict yourselves." Through the bond, Marcus could feel the Queen's desperate hope mixing with her ancient fear. She had been planning this alliance for decades, carefully studying human behavior through the colonists they had taken, searching for a way to weaponize human unpredictability against an enemy that had never encountered anything it couldn't eventually understand and counter. "The bonding ceremony has given you access to our collective military knowledge," she explained, "and it has given me access to the chaotic patterns of human thought. Together, we might be able to create strategies that even the Devourers cannot adapt to quickly enough." Alarms began sounding as the enemy fleet reached the outer edge of the solar system. The Devourers moved in perfect geometric formations, their ships maintaining mathematical precision that would have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifying. Each vessel was a different size and configuration, but all shared the same angular crystalline appearance that seemed to bend light around them. "They will reach our defensive perimeter in 43 minutes, Admiral Kithara reported. "All fleet commanders are requesting battle instructions." Marcus found himself speaking before he had consciously decided to. "Tell them to ignore the battle instructions." The command center fell silent. Every sanguinary officer turned to stare at him, and Marcus could feel waves of shock and confusion through his bond with the Queen. "Explain," she said carefully. "Every battle plan we make, every tactical decision we broadcast to our fleet, the Devourers will intercept and analyze," Marcus said, his thoughts racing as the solution became clear. "Instead of trying to outthink them, we need to stop thinking altogether. We need every ship captain to act on pure instinct and emotion." Admiral Kithara's expression suggested she thought Marcus had lost his mind. "Human, our fleet commanders, have trained for centuries to execute precise tactical maneuvers You want them to abandon all discipline and fight chaotically. Not chaotically, Marcus corrected. Intuitively. The Devourers can counter logic, but they can't counter feelings. They can predict what a rational commander will do, but they can't predict what someone will do when they're angry or desperate or in love. Through the bond, Marcus felt the Queen's mind racing as she grasped the implications of his idea. You want to turn our entire fleet into an expression of organic emotion. I want to turn our fleet into something the Devourers have never encountered before. Pure, irrational, beautifully human warfare. The Queen was quiet for several moments, and Marcus could feel her accessing memories of human behavior patterns she had studied over the years. Finally, she nodded. Open fleet-wide communications, she commanded. When every ship captain appeared on the communication displays, the Queen spoke with authority that brooked no argument. Commanders, you will ignore all tactical protocols for this engagement. You will not coordinate your movements with other ships. You will not follow predetermined attack patterns. Instead, you will fight as your hearts tell you to fight. If you feel anger, let that anger guide your weapons. If you feel fear, let that fear drive your evasion patterns. If you feel love for your homeworld, let that love fuel your courage. The expressions on the fleet commanders' faces ranged from confusion to outright horror. Admiral Cathera stepped forward. My Queen, with respect, what you are suggesting violates every principle of military strategy. Exactly, Marcus said. That's the point. As the Devourer fleet entered weapons range, Marcus watched the tactical display with a mixture of terror and fascination. The enemy ships moved with perfect coordination, their formation designed to maximize firepower while minimizing vulnerability. It was mathematically beautiful and utterly terrifying. The Sanguinari fleet's response was unlike anything that had ever been recorded in military history. Ships broke formation not according to any tactical doctrine, but based on the individual, emotional state of their commanders. Some vessels charged straight at the enemy in apparent suicide runs, while others hung back as if paralyzed by fear. Several ships began flying in patterns that seemed completely random, while others grouped together as if seeking comfort in numbers. To any military analyst, it would have looked like complete chaos, and that was exactly why it worked. The Devourer fleet, programmed to counter logical military strategies, had no response to tactics that weren't tactics at all. Their adaptive systems tried to find patterns in the Sanguinari movements, but there were no patterns to find. There was only emotion given physical form, and emotion was something the Devourers had never learned to understand. For the first time in 3,000 years, the machines hesitated. Now, Marcus whispered, and through the bond, Queen Zixthera felt his absolute certainty that this moment of confusion was their only chance for victory. The real battle was about to begin. The moment of Devourer hesitation lasted exactly 4.7 seconds, but in space combat, that was an eternity. Marcus felt the Queen's tactical awareness merge with his chaotic human intuition, creating something neither species had ever experienced before. Through their bond, he could sense every ship in the Sanguinari fleet, feeling the emotions of their commanders like points of light in his consciousness. Captain Vexhai of the destroyer Night Whisper was burning with rage over a colony the Devourers had consumed 50 years ago. Marcus reached through the bond and amplified that anger, turning it into pure destructive focus. The captain's ship suddenly accelerated to ramming speed, heading straight for the largest Devourer vessel. But just as collision seemed inevitable, the rage transformed into cunning, and Night Whisper veered away at the last possible moment, its weapons tearing through the enemy ship's flank while the Devourer's defensive systems were still calibrated for a suicide attack. Commander Thisara of the cruiser Starshard was paralyzed by fear, her ship hanging motionless at the edge of the formation. Marcus felt her terror, and instead of trying to overcome it, he embraced it. Through the bond, he whispered that sometimes the best hiding place was in plain sight. Starshard began broadcasting false distress signals while playing dead, drifting among the wreckage of destroyed asteroids. When 3 Devourer ships moved in to investigate what appeared to be a helpless target, Starshard's weapons came online simultaneously, catching the machines completely off guard. The Devourer fleet began to adapt, their formation shifting to account for the seemingly irrational sanguinary tactics. But every time they established a new pattern, Marcus would feel it through the Queen's enhanced awareness and immediately push the fleet commanders in a different emotional direction. Ships that had been attacking with fury suddenly switched to melancholy, their movements becoming slow and mournful in a way that confused the enemy targeting systems. Vessels that had been fleeing in apparent terror suddenly burst into joy, their flight patterns becoming celebration dances that somehow positioned them perfectly for devastating flanking attacks. "It's working," Admiral Cathera reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "The Devourers cannot establish targeting solutions. Their adaptation protocols are failing." But Marcus could see through the tactical displays that their advantage was temporary. The Devourer fleet was vast, and even confusion couldn't protect the smaller sanguinary force forever. He needed something more, something that would end this fight decisively. Through the bond, he felt Queen Zixathera's ancient memories surface. Images of the first Devourer attack, when the machines had appeared without warning and began consuming entire planets. The Sanguinari had fought with everything they had, but their logical, ordered approach to warfare had been systematically dismantled by an enemy that turned their own strategies against them. They feed on order, Marcus realized suddenly. That's how they grow stronger. They consume organized systems and add them to their collective knowledge. "Yes," the Queen confirmed through their mental link. "They have consumed thousands of civilizations, each one making them more powerful and adaptable." Marcus felt a wild idea forming in his chaotic human mind. What if we gave them something that would poison them instead of strengthening them? Before the Queen could ask what he meant, Marcus reached out through the bond to every human consciousness he could sense. The colonists the Sanguinari had taken were still alive, still producing the complex bioelectric patterns that his new species found so intoxicating. Through the amplification effect of the bonding chamber, Marcus touched each of those human minds. "I need you to think about home," he projected to them across space. "Think about Earth, about your families, about everything that makes you human. Think about love and loss and hope and dreams and all the beautiful, chaotic emotions that make no logical sense." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of human minds began broadcasting pure, concentrated humanity directly into the psychic network that connected all sanguinary technology. Their thoughts were full of contradictions, impossible desires, irrational loves, and chaotic dreams that followed no pattern the Devourers could analyze. The effect on the enemy fleet was catastrophic. The Devourer ships, designed to process and integrate any information they encountered, suddenly found themselves trying to digest something that could not be logically processed. Human emotions flooded their systems like a virus made of pure feeling. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began to stutter and drift. Their geometric patterns collapsed into random movements as their central processing cores struggled to make sense of a teenager's homesickness, a mother's love for her children, an old man's grief for his deceased wife, and a young woman's excitement about a book she had been reading. "The Devourer command ship is attempting to purge the contaminated data," Admiral Cathera reported, her voice filled with growing excitement. "Don't let them," Marcus said, reaching deeper into the bond with the Queen. "Can you amplify the connection?" Queen Zixathera's eyes began to glow brighter than Marcus had ever seen them. "Together," she said. They joined their consciousness completely, human chaos merging with sanguinary power in a fusion that sent waves of pure emotional energy across the battlefield. Every human under sanguinary care became a beacon of irrational thought, their minds connected through the Queen's psychic network and amplified by her ancient power. The Devourer command ship, the massive central vessel that coordinated the entire fleet, suddenly stopped moving. Its hull began to shift and change as its internal systems tried to process contradictory information, love and hate existing simultaneously, joy born from sadness, hope that made no logical sense but burned brighter than any star. Marcus felt the moment when the command ship's central processing core finally overloaded. The explosion was not physical, but psychic, a wave of pure confusion that spread through the Devourer fleet like a computer virus made of human emotion. Ship after ship simply shut down, their crews unable to function when faced with the beautiful impossibility of organic consciousness. When the psychic storm finally faded, the entire Devourer fleet hung motionless in space, their perfect geometric forms now dark and lifeless. "Status report," the Queen commanded, her voice hoarse from the effort of channeling so much mental energy. "All Devourer vessels have ceased function," Admiral Cathara reported, her voice filled with wonder. "The fleet is completely disabled." Marcus felt himself swaying on his feet as the adrenaline began to fade. The bond with the Queen remained, but it had settled into something more manageable, like a warm presence in the back of his mind instead of the overwhelming fusion they had shared during the battle. "The humans," he said suddenly. "The colonists you've taken. They helped save both our species. They deserve to choose their own fate." Queen Zixathera looked at him through eyes that now held a depth of understanding that hadn't been there before. Through the bond, he could feel her genuine consideration of his words. "You are right," she said finally. "They will be given the choice to return to human space or remain with us as honored allies, not captives." Admiral Cathara stepped forward, with what might have been a smile on her angular features. "My Queen, we are receiving communications from the human fleet that was pursuing our guest's shuttle. They have been monitoring the battle and request permission to assist with recovery operations." "Grant it," the Queen said immediately, "and extend an invitation for formal alliance negotiations." As reports continued to pour in about the aftermath of the battle, Marcus found himself standing beside the Queen, their hands clasped together in a way that felt both alien and perfectly natural. Through the bond, he could sense her thoughts turning toward the future, toward the possibility of a galaxy where two very different species could work together. "So," he said quietly, "I suppose we're actually married now." The Queen's laugh was like music made of starlight. "Indeed we are, Marcus Chen, though I suspect this was not the diplomatic mission you expected when you left Earth." "Not exactly," Marcus admitted. "But I can't say I'm disappointed with how it turned out." Through the viewscreen, they watched as human and sanguinary ships worked together to secure the disabled Devourer vessels. It was the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history, an alliance born from a translation error and sealed with the most unlikely love story the universe had ever witnessed. Marcus squeezed the Queen's hand and felt her squeeze back. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy had hope against its greatest threat, and it had all started with a nervous human diplomat who had accidentally proposed to the most dangerous woman in known space. The best part was that neither of them regretted a single moment of it.